It's episode 141 of Making It. I'm Bob Clagett, here with Dave Picciuto.
Hi, Bob Clagett.
Hi, Dave Picciuto. How are you?
Very good. This is take two.
Take two. We already recorded this intro, but we're going to do it again. We also have Jimmy Diresta.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey. So, Dave, everything sorted?
Yeah, lots of computer problems this morning, and I think we're up and running. So the recorder seems to be working this time.
That sounds like a topic. I mean, it doesn't have to be today's topic since we had a little bit. The idea of technical failure. How do we handle technical failure?
Ooh.
What do you do if everything just shuts off on you?
Take a nap.
Start the podcast 3 hours later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, that might be a good topic. We can, Well, in between our first attempt today and now, you've had some stuff happen in your shop, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes, they laid down the carpet today, and it looks great. They were very worried that there were going to be gaps in the carpet squares because the floor is very uneven, and the carpet guy was very skeptical, and I was like, let's just go with it, do our best, and it came out pretty good. You can see some of the seams, but it's you have to look for it. It's not noticeable.
The floor looks like gray cement.
Yeah, it does. It does. Got the ceiling tile in there. I got the lights. Well, I got the ceiling grid in there. The tiles are not in yet. They'll be in a couple weeks. The lights are in. The walls are painted. The electrical, for the most part, is done. I just need to do the floor outlets, which might happen tonight or tomorrow. And then we got trim. But now that the carpet's in, I can start moving a couple tools in there, which makes me really, really happy because everything is just shoved in the car garage, and it's a mess, and I can't find anything, and it's frustrating.
So,
Hey, you guys remember this morning when we started? I told you a funny story about carpet. Do you guys want to hear that story again?
Yes. So there's a story that we recorded that's really gross. I'm gonna turn my headphones off.
We could just say no and just put it on the after show. You want to do that later?
No, go ahead. It was gross. It's one of your stories. Go ahead.
Well, when I was a teenager, when I was a young teenager, we were like anywhere between 14 to 15 years old, me and a group of my friends. We built a clubhouse in my backyard. It was like a proper building. It was like a tool shed, but we hung out in there. And we had a secret entrance from the neighbor's yard, so my mother never knew. We would cut out of school and come into the clubhouse through my neighbor's yard. My mother never knew. We would hide in there and smoke cigarettes and stuff.
New details. We didn't get that earlier.
I got to make it better so you guys are interested. And one of the days, there's like this small office building in the neighborhood, and they threw out this beautiful shag carpet. It was like gray shag carpet. From all appearances, it looked like there was nothing wrong with it. So we took it and we carpeted the whole inside of the clubhouse. And it wasn't until like we had this one section that's why you guys might say like, why didn't you know this? But we got this one section and we put it down on the floor, and then we realized that it was this thick kind of Austin Powers thick, like 1-inch shag carpet. The one section was completely loaded with toenails because the place that we stole it from was a podiatrist. I might have told this story before because I remember thinking about it.
You told it. I've heard it twice today, which is fantastic.
I don't know if you heard it. I might have said it another time. Like,
So I don't think we talked about this on the show.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
We would it was a place where we all kissed our first girl, and I'm not even joking. It was like a guy's clubhouse. And then when we turned 15, we put a whole extension on it. We had a little bar in it, and we grew illegal plants in there. It was a lot of fun. It was a good kid place.
You said something that's a little confusing to me.
Yeah.
You said beautiful shag carpet.
Yeah. I'm talking. This is 1983.
Okay.
When we did it. At the time, it was beautiful for 1983. Yeah. No, because there were sections of it that sat under someone's desk. It was completely unused, or at least unworn, I should say. So that was our first impression. We're like, wow, this looks like it's brand new. And then when we started unrolling it and cutting section, we put it on the walls and the ceiling. By the way, it wasn't just the floor.
Super cool.
Whoa. Yeah. This thing was the inside of a van, like a 1970s Chevy van. If this van's a rocking, don't bother rocking. The inside of this clubhouse looked like that.
I heard toenails. That's all I heard. That's yeah.
So So we just picked all the toenails out.
Gross, dude. Cool.
But your carpet's too small to hide toenails, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bring it back to the shop carpet. Bringing it back.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
So gross. Yeah.
Hey, sometimes you get a dud when you pick the garbage. What can I say?
I just put out a video making wedding rings that went live a couple hours ago in between computer problems.
Nice.
So that video is up now. I made them in segmented pieces, kind of like what a wood turner would do. And so that's up and seems to be getting a nice warm reception. Anytime I put Kelly in the video, I get nice comments.
Oh, yeah. So I know you made several different types of rings, and you've talked about this one before, like the way that you're going to do this. And I haven't watched the video yet, but did you find anything about this process that worked better, worked worse than other ones, or?
Well, I what I wanted to do since it's 8 segmented pieces, I wanted to use a hose clamp to kind of glue everything together. Because I see that done with vases, and like Frank Howarth and Kyle Toth, they do that, and it works great. This was too small, so I ended up just like super gluing each piece up by piece, and I wouldn't say these rings are any different than the veneer rings as far as strength or durability. It's just a different process. There's a lot of glue in there because there's a lot of pieces. So it's kind of hard to explain, but there's a middle layer, which is one piece, and then the 2 outside layers each have 8 pieces. So there's 17 pieces total in each ring, which equals a lot of glue, and I think it gets its strength from all that glue.
Gotcha. Yeah. I wonder if is there anything, this is maybe way off topic, is there any sort of something that could penetrate wood and then harden? I know like things like Danish oil, when you wipe them on, they go into the grain and then they harden, making they harden the surface. But if you had 2 pieces, like in that case, 2 pieces together, is there something that you could soak down in between that would kind of carry over a connection from one piece of wood to another?
There's Scott Meek, the plane maker, has made some planes before, wood hand planes, where he would send them off, and there would be some sort of process that removed all the air and water from the wood and then infused it with resin. So there was resin that went all the way in, and I think there's some sort of I don't know what the process is. I'm sure there's some sort of like pressure cooker type thing to get to replace all the air with epoxy or resin. I mean, but that could be one way.
Yeah,
I don't know if Jimmy has any other ideas to harden the wood.
No, well, you could put it in a pressure pot and force it into the wood. They sell the scales for knives, and I don't know the proper terminology, but they're infused with resin, and they also put dye in it. So you might buy a piece of burly wood that has like a blue hue to it because it's infused with like a blue dyed resin. You see that a lot of knife shows, and a lot of knife guys have that stuff.
Gotcha. I think I've talked about this before, but since it's kind of related, somebody told me one time about a technique for making guitar necks. I think it's mostly necks, but you could do it for whatever, called roasted maple. Have we talked about this before?
We talked about it, but I totally forget what the process is.
So there's usually one of the big problems with making guitar necks is that over time, the wood will change shape, and that's a bad thing. And there's a bunch of different ways to stabilize the necks, but somebody was telling me about this process for heating maple so that the syrup or whatever that's actually in the tree that typically comes out as syrup, they bake it in a certain way or roast it in a certain way that caramelizes the stuff inside the wood. And so it basically locks the wood into a position that will never change.
Oh.
And so they do that, at the raw stage of things before it's worked on. And then when you cut it down, you basically have wood that won't move. And now I don't know how that affects the vibration and the movement that you want in wood for a guitar. I don't have any idea, but I thought it was a really interesting approach to like use like something about the wood itself to help stabilize it. Seemed pretty cool.
Yeah.
But he was basically just telling me the process. I don't know of anybody who's actually done it to know, firsthand experience how well it works, but still pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, way off topic. Jimmy, what are you up to?
Kyle's here. Kyle from Illinois, RR Builders. He's here, and he's building. The backyard's got thousands of pieces of wood in piles everywhere. It's
Awesome.
pretty incredible. So today he might have 1 or 2 walls up since we first spoke this morning.
That's
I said,
exciting.
what do you think? He's like, oh yeah, I'll have one of the walls up today, which is so exciting.
Yeah.
And,
That's crazy.
it's crazy. I said, how long are you going to be here? He goes, depending upon weather. He goes, we could be here as long as 2 weeks, which I was really surprised. I thought he was going to be here for like a day or 2, but he's got a lot of work to do. They got to put a roof on and stuff. And he keeps warning me. He goes, dude, this is going to be really tall. He goes, he's like pointing at trees. I got a lot of tall trees in my property. He's like, it's going to be like as tall as that tree. He goes, this is going to look like a church. Because I'm just warning you. Because my peak is also rather pointy. We have we looked at a lot of European buildings and we chose a pretty steep pitch, A12 pitch. And so this building's going to look really it's almost going to look nautical. It's going to be all black. The whole exterior is going to be black. All the window frame's going to be black. The roof's black. Standing seam, metal black. So it's going to look pretty cool. It'll look like kind of a New England-y kind of building. So it's actually happening. It's crazy.
So
yeah, congrats.
So exciting. Thank you.
the height there for the roof, is that a practical thing at all? Like, do you have a reason for that, or is it just you were looking for a certain look for the building?
2 stories. Just try and get 2 clean stories. So the ground floor is going to have a 16-foot high ceiling, and then the second story to have a practical ceiling with a scissor truss, so that we could have some practical usable space. We had to kind of make and then there's a limit. There's a height limit in my area. I don't have too many guidelines to go by in this neighborhood. We don't have we don't have zoning basically, but there are some guidelines, and the height to peak is 34 feet. So we're going to be right at 34 feet.
Wow.
It's exciting.
That's awesome. Man.
It's funny when you hire other people to do work for you and you just assume that, oh, that's only going to take a few hours or a couple days. And then it's like you don't know the process, and it actually takes many, many man hours.
Well, it's Kyle and one other person, Kyle and Greg, and they knock it out of the park every week on Instagram. So I'm like, dude, isn't this just like an Instagram story? Like, when are you going to be done? Going to be done at 6? He could spend the month here. I don't care. I love Kyle. So it's exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very exciting. Thank you.
Very cool. Well, let's see. What have I been up to? This weekend, I went to a mini maker fair in Louisville, Kentucky.
Atlanta was also this weekend, no?
Yeah, Atlanta was this weekend. It's like the first year in several years that I haven't gone to the Atlanta one. That was my local one, and now Louisville is my local. So went there, and it was the first mini fair I'd been to in a while, and so it was interesting to remember like how small some of them can be, because we're used to going to the big ones. And it was cool though. There were only a couple of individual people that were like maker people. Most of it was schools, and there's a science museum. It was like kind of organizations, which is fine. There were a lot of things for the kids to do, a lot of hands-on activities, put together by those different organizations, and that was good. But it was a little strange not to see more like, I'm just a person who makes, whatever, like individual things, because that's so big at some of the other fairs. So hopefully next year there'll be some more individuals there, and maybe it'll spread out a little bit. It's the first time I've been to this one too, so I don't know if it's smaller or bigger than it was in previous years. I don't really know, but let's see, what else have I been doing? I made a guitar stand. That'll be out this week, hopefully.
Got some cool features on it.
Well, thanks. It was interesting. Yeah. It was like one of those where I was working on another project. I got stuck because of some material that I had to order. And so I had basically 2 days and thought, like, what can I make quickly and, to use some new thing. What are you doing, Jimmy?
What do you hear? What do you say?
I see you smiling, and then your camera is getting darker and lighter and darker and lighter. So I thought you were like playing with some setting, but you're just. Oh,
you know what I'm doing? No. Honestly, no. It's just the light. My camera is so weird. The minute I move, because I'm always usually backlit, so that I'm not conscious of. But I was looking at McMaster-Carr. So it gets me excited when I'm looking at McMaster-Carr.
It makes me smile. So many types of
Are we doing
bolts.
a podcast?
Yeah.
Were we doing a podcast? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's cool. But anyway, I made this little guitar stand, and it's like it folds up. It was the first time I had made something using the wood taps from Andy Klein and Mark Spagnola. And so that was kind of cool to use those for the first time. They worked great. Made it out of solid walnut. Got some brass pieces I had to kind of make to make it work. So it was cool. I learned a lot in doing it. So it was a nice little project.
Nice.
So
That's cool.
yeah, that's what I've been up to.
It's funny. While we were talking, just this minute, I got an email from Mark Spagnola. He told me I got a little income on my affiliate link for the taps.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he just sent me a $60. Thank you, Mark.
Sweet.
So I can only assume now that you have a guitar stand that you're gonna play guitar a lot more.
He has a great place to hang his jacket now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Feel free to assume that all you want to, but I would love to, man. I mean, honestly, it was kind of cool because I needed to take some pictures, and I had to make sure it worked. So I had to get a guitar out of a case for the first time since I've moved. And so I got one guitar out and set it on there. I'm like, cool, that works. I should try it with all the guitars just as an excuse to get them out. So it was kind of cool to get them all out, play them a little bit, just not plugged in, and definitely made me want to play some more. But I don't know when I'll be able to make that a priority. So one of these days, I will.
One of these days.
One of these days. But that's what I've been up to, pretty much. Shop's coming together. We're still building it out. Still, things happening with lighting and power here and there and stuff like that. But it's definitely way more usable than it was a few weeks ago. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
So, what are we going to talk about?
It's a subject that we've been avoiding for years. And I think it's time we talk about it.
Tacos. No?
No? Is it me?
Yeah. Jimmy, you're fired. Sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. You sold our name to NBC, so...
No!
You guys were in on it every step of the way.
Maybe we should talk about that.
That's out there now, right? Can we talk about that?
We can talk about it.
We'll
I haven't heard a word from them.
about
I think I got fired. I think I'm not even in any news articles.
Oh.
They leave me out of all the news clippings so far that I've seen.
Give us the lowdown, Jimmy.
The show that I went to do in California was a show for NBC called The Handmade Project. And before they actually hired me, I didn't know if I was going to be on or not. I got a call from the producers, and they're like, hey, we've been kicking around new names. And I'm like, oh, great. They want me to brainstorm new names. They really entrust my opinion. And they go, well, the name we keep coming up with is Making It. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's the name of my podcast.
Wait a second.
I go, that is a great name. I use it for my podcast. And they go, yeah, we want to buy it from you. And I don't know if it's appropriate to say the numbers. All I'll say is that the numbers just weren't enough at the end of the day. And they offered us a number which the three of us agreed was too low. And then we said, this is the number. And it was not $1 million. I'll put it to you that way. But we were very fair.
We should have gone for $1 million.
Well, it would seem like from the number we gave, nothing would have mattered. So I said, we went back to them with a number, which wasn't a lot of money. I mean, it certainly wasn't millions of dollars, and it wasn't tens of thousands of dollars. Oh, maybe it was. Yeah, maybe it was. Give you that much. And they said, that's too much. And we said, well, we don't even want to sell the name, but it's not even something we want to do. So I don't care what you say. And they're like, well, how about this? And I'm like, the number we said is the number that we would draw the line in the sand. That's the number that we would be willing to rebrand everything. The work would mostly be on you two guys. So I said, no, this is the number we want, and that's it. And every conversation was slightly veiled with you guys don't have a trademark. We can just take it anyway. The only reason we're dealing with you is, because you're associated with the show. And I was talking to lawyers at this point, not the producers of the show. The lawyers are heartless. They don't care. And so after much back and forth, we all three of us agreed, let them use the name. The show might come and go, but we'll still be here. We've been here for 4 years. We're not going anywhere. 3 years. We're going up on a 3-year anniversary, right?
Yeah. Next week.
Yeah. Both parties agreed to use the name.
Yeah.
That's it. We just said, you guys use it, we'll use it. We don't want any money. They were essentially offering us money to not use it ever, so that it wouldn't be. But we still pop up at the top of the Google search. A friend of mine said it's going to be hard for them to undo that. Who knows? I guess it's just a matter of, if everybody listening constantly Googles Making It with Jim, Bob, and Dave, stay at the top of the Google list?
Well, it's a lot more complicated than that. It's backlinks, links that go to our site, links that go to their site. It's the weight of those links that are linking to ours. It's complicated.
Yeah.
Because you know what happened the other day? I was Googling myself to see if anybody updated my Wikipedia, and I Googled it. I have a couple of fans that actually update my Wikipedia accurately. And so I went and I checked it. But as I Googled my name, of course, the search, it's usually how much is Jimmy worth? Is Jimmy married? Taylor Forrest, Nick Offerman. Those are the top 4 searches that are associated with my name. The top 3 or 4 searches were like Jimmy Diresta TV show. Is Jimmy working with Nick Offerman? What's the name of the TV show? And those are like the new searches that pop up at the top, or at least they did about a week ago. So anyway, so they're going to use the name Making It. We agreed. They signed a little something that said, they're okay with us using it, of course, and that they're not going to try and take it away from us when the show becomes massively popular. And so we're going to just coexist, and we did not accept any money. So
yeah.
And our thought process is that maybe we'll get some traffic from it, maybe not, but everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you don't have to do anything. And the name Making It existed before we came along with it. I actually sold the name of the show Making It to HGTV in 2005. And that show was renamed Hammered. So the show Making It. And then if you Google Making It, there was a show, the guy from American Wealth in London, David Naughton, he had a show called Making It and a song called Making It in like 1980, 82, 83. So it's not a brand new concept, but it was appropriate when we decided to use it, and they think it's appropriate, so they decided to use it.
It'll be fine. It'll be
fine.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
So I'm on 2 shows called Making It. So from now on, my name is going to be called Jimmy Two Shows.
Jimmy Two Shows.
Oh, yes.
I like that.
Yes. I like that character in Goodfellas.
That's funny. Do you know what Jimmy Two Shows is a joke, and Nick called me that as a joke, but when we had Hammered, my brother John he had the ability to do dramatic and comedy, even though we were doing this reality show on HGTV. And so John was able to land a show, and it was the show where John met Nick Offerman. It's how Nick and I personally became friends, through a show called American Body Shop. But John had Hammered at the same time as American Body Shop, and he made everybody on the staff of Hammered call him Johnny Two Shows. So he walked around like with his chest puffed out, and he said, from now on, I want everybody to call me Johnny Two Shows. And so it was a funny joke because John would say, I'm Johnny Two Shows on the set of American Body Shop, which I never went to. But then when we were dealing with this name thing, Nick did a callback from 8 years ago and texted me. It was 10 years ago, and he texted me. He goes, now you can call yourself Jimmy Two Shows. So it was a callback to my brother walking around peacocking that he has 2 TV shows.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so that's the story there. And the show Making It is actually, we're doing the show Making It right now. No, but the show Making It on NBC is going to be out in January, I think. There's been some press releases on it.
Should we rename the original Making It? Should we do that? So everything.
We'll do a little starburst in the corner, like it's a box of cereal.
Yeah.
The original. New recipe, original recipe.
Making it classic.
Making it classic. I like that.
So yeah, that's it. And in the show, I play the shop teacher. I'm like a shop teacher. Actually, here's another funny story which I could share with my fans who support us, and I'll tell you absolute truth. So when I signed the contract, I didn't even know what my title was. I knew I wasn't a judge. I knew I wasn't a contestant. And so when I got there, my agent emails me. He goes, your title is Master Helper. I'm like, Master Helper? That sounds like a little bit like something else, Master something else. So I said, I don't really want to be a Master Helper. I said, I'd rather be just my name. Don't Master Helper is not a compliment. And they said, you guys are head in your hands laughing at me.
Oh man.
So I said, I don't want to be Master Helper. I just want to be Jimmy the shop guy, or call me Jimmy the shop teacher. And so I've appealed to them, because now that I see some PR coming out about the show, I said, please, I beg of you, I'm on my hands and knees. Just call me Jimmy Diresta from YouTube. We'll be assisting the makers in the shop. That's it. Or Jimmy Diresta maker is going to be helping guys. I don't want to be the Master Helper. I said, that is not a compliment. So I might be the Master Helper. And so, especially after this podcast, everyone's going to read me calling me the Master Helper, but we'll see what the credits are. If I even make the edit, if I even get through the editing process, we'll see what happens.
I mean,
somebody out.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, somebody out there, please pull the Hamburger Helper logo and change it to Master Helper and put Jimmy Diresta on there and tweet it.
Is that the one with the little hand face on it helping? Yeah. That could be my face.
So, not having done any TV, and I know there's really no way you could know this too, but is it an actual possibility they could completely cut you out of every episode of that show? Or are you...
Maybe.
Really?
I mean, it would be difficult, and I don't know why they would cut me out. Maybe because I'm a loudmouth. On the show, I was a bit snarky and a little bit complainy because the workshop wasn't really up to par. So I kind of got a reputation of being a snarky pain in the butt. But I let that go soon enough because I realized, you know what, this isn't my production. The show isn't about me. So I just kept my mouth shut after like 2 episodes of complaining about the tool room. And they could possibly cut me out. I don't think it's going to happen, but my role on the show is I am not the person. I am not I'm not the lead character on the show. Absolutely. Yeah. Not. I'm like, the show is about the contestants and Amy and Nick and the judges. And I'm a guy that helps them make sure that nobody gets injured in the shop. And also, like, for instance, when there was a couple of challenges where things had to be engineered. And if you're not experienced engineer, making a chair is easy for us because we've done it several times. But if you've never made a chair, making a chair is complicated. It has to be engineered properly. And if the judges are going to test them, you want to make sure nobody gets hurt on camera or falls or the chair doesn't collapse. So that's where I would step in. I would help them engineer stuff, simple stuff. But if you've never made anything like complicated, and now because of this show, these contestants are being asked to do things a little bit outside their comfort zone because they want to, you got to like up the ante, you got to up the volume a little bit because this is a big TV show. So these people were stepping outside their comfort zone slightly, and nobody got injured, and everybody did a wonderful job. But I just was there also to make sure, like, I'm like, hey, if you do this over there, then you have a lot more strength. Or if you use these screws instead of these nails, you'd end up with a lot more strength. So that technically I was there to make sure nobody got hurt and everybody did a good job engineering and making the product that they needed to make. I was the shop teacher, not the master helper.
Master helper.
Was it fun?
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. And I got to be if we shot a sequence, I'm in the opening credits with Nick, I think. And I worked with Nick a little bit. I hardly saw those guys. I mean, I did see them every day, but I hardly worked with them on camera. They were busy in the main house doing the thing, and I was out in the workshop helping the people with the work. And once in a while per episode, they would wander around and come out to the shop and see what everybody was working on. So if the edit goes the way it seemed like it was being laid out, and we interact a little bit through each episode, but not a lot. I mean, enough for their, like, if they need time, they'll definitely cut my segment out. Because there's more important things than Nick and I flirting. Seriously. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when it comes time for the show to air in January, I would like to do a show on just how a TV show works. And I just want to pick your brain, like how, what starts, how you start off the day, how do they find people?
Oh, yeah. Well, apparently there was a very big, and the more people I talked to behind the scenes, everyone's like, oh, I applied for that show, I applied for that show, I applied for that show. And it was funny, there was also helpers on the show that actually were all either applied or auditioned for the show. And they ended up just coming and being on-camera helpers, but they don't really have a credit, they don't have a title as their name, but they'll be considered like on-camera helpers. Because there was a lot of physical stuff that needed to happen, and because of safety and expectations, they wanted everybody to not do everything themselves. So, some people take a big bite at something and needed somebody to help paint while they were busy doing something else. So there was a lot of helpers on the show, and I was the master helper. Who gets a credit?
You should definitely do some new business cards that say master helper on them. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I started the YouTube channel Master Helper, and I'm just gonna be standing there handing people stuff. You want this? Get this. You need this, Rich? Here's the blue spray paint. Nice. Oh wait, you should put the 2-inch nails in it now. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's right. You should put glue in that joint. Yep, that's it. That's better.
It should be. It should be an audio only YouTube channel too, because I think the audio only aspect of it really works.
Yeah. Are you sure you want to put that like that? Maybe you should put that on the other side. Oh, that's better. That's good.
Before we get distracted, what we're really going to talk about?
We're really going to talk about is what tools should you buy if you're going to get started in woodworking. I'm going to throw it to you first, Bob.
Oh, man.
If you're going to buy 2 tools, what are the first 2 tools you're going to buy?
I'm not going to answer it that way.
Crap.
Well, okay, so this is one of those things, like you said, we've not covered this because this comes up like weekly for all of us, like all the time at least. It's when people get started, this is a question that a lot of people have, right? So as a way to try to have like a central answer for this, I wrote an article on my website about this maybe a year ago or something. And it was basically just, I'll put a link to it in the show notes if you want to check it out. But basically what I was saying is there's no right or wrong. These are the 3 tools you need to start with, because I think it really depends on what you want to make. And for me, at least, the way that I learn things, new skills the best, is to figure out a project and then learn the skills that I need to accomplish that project. And same goes for tools. Like, just buy a tool to accomplish a project something that you really want to do. Because if you go to the store, and a lot of people do this, you go to the store and you're like, all right, I got tool money. I'm going to get a table saw and a jigsaw and a scroll saw and a whatever. And then you come home and you're like, okay, what am I going to make? And you're like, I'm going to make a motorcycle. Well, you can't make a motorcycle with any of those tools. So it makes more sense to figure out what tools you need to accomplish the project that you want. So that's kind of the way I went about it, rather than having a concrete, set of tools. I mean, I think if you just want to be really general, I think personally a circular saw is probably the first saw that I would buy. Just because I think it's a good kind of middle ground of, it can do a lot of stuff. It can't do everything, but it can do a lot, and is a good crossover between a table saw and a jigsaw and a miter saw. It can do a lot of that same stuff at the same time. Like that and a drill can get you pretty far. But that's my opinion. What do you think, Jimmy?
Now, are we talking like classic woodwork or should I say more traditional?
It's a good question.
Are we talking about like, no electric tool work, or are we looking just getting started in the shop? So are we talking like, woodworking for mere mortals, or, hand school tool?
This is why we can't answer the question.
Yeah.
Right.
Depends on how you're coming at it. I mean, I would think that if you want to do like hand tool woodworking, there's probably a very specific set of, I guess the same thing applies though, right? Depending on what you're making, you're going to want different stuff. I don't know. I'm not a hand tool person.
I have an answer for both. I would say get a bandsaw, of course, because I think a bandsaw you could do a lot with. You can make straight cuts, curve cuts. You can resaw wood, so if you get a bandsaw, and you could buy you can get pieces of plywood. You could order them online, or you can get them from Home Depot now, where they're cut into smaller pieces. So you can get it big enough to manage it, to break it down on the bandsaw. Or a circular saw with a track saw. Absolutely is a necessity. I think a track saw, if you can't afford a table saw. There's so much you can do with just a track saw, and there's a lot of track saws out there now, and there's lots of kits to turn a traditional circular saw into a track saw. And there's ways of doing it where you don't even need to buy anything. You can just use some wood and engineer it accurately. You can make your own track saw out of an old skill saw or circular saw. And if you're going to just do basic hand tools, I think you need maybe a pull saw, like a kind of a Japanese style pull saw, because they cut so beautifully, and a hand plane, a good low angle block plane. And hand planes is something, there's like a whole category guys get into. I buy planes. I don't even do that much type of woodwork, but every once in a while I'm like, oh, I'm glad I have this plane, because this is a perfect opportunity to use my rabbit shoulder plane or whatever it might be. And so you could just use like a simple low angle block plane, like a 2-inch wide plane. You can even just get one at a flea market and fix it up, and they all work the same. It's just a matter of having a sharp blade. As long as it's in the shoe right and it's sharpened well enough, you can really get a lot of miles out of it. And then once you get into using a hand plane, you start dealing with how the chip breaker works and the angles, and if you want your blade to go as wide as the shoe so you can get right inside the corner of something or whatever it is you're going to be doing. Those are all details that come in as you get more experience. But I would say bandsaw, a flat track saw, a hand plane, and then that little pull saw. With that, you could pretty much do a lot. And then you're ultimately going to need like a little set of chisels. And that's it.
I think if you, a very general woodworking, what most people think of woodworking is, if you are low budget, a circular saw, a drill, and a jigsaw. So you can do straight cuts, you can do curve cuts, and you can drill holes. And then you're going to need clamps. If you have a little bit of a bigger budget, your general tools, you would upgrade that circular saw to a table saw. You would upgrade that jigsaw to a bandsaw. You would upgrade that drill to a drill press. And more clamps. Just keep adding on to your clamp collection. What do you call it?
Clamp champ.
Yes.
Got to be a clamp champ.
Yeah.
I don't know where I said this, but I said it before, but my theory on clamps. Every time you go to Home Depot and you spend over $100, buy a $20 clamp. Just throw it in your basket. Every time you go to Home Depot, if you're going to buy if you're buying products for a client, or if you're buying products for the house, or you're doing house renovation, throw in 1 or 2 clamps into the basket. And then eventually, because they're only it depends on which one you buy, but they're anywhere between $10 to $20 if you're buying the good screw clamps, the old Jorgensen screw clamps. And before long, you have a giant pile of clamps and you don't know what to do with them. So you end up with a lot of clamps, and you always need them. There's always going to be that one glue up where you use every clamp in your shop and you wish you had 2 more or 3 more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
always throw one in your basket at Home Depot, one at a time. And that's how, it's like the Johnny Cash song, one piece at a time, where he stole the Cadillac from the factory.
Yes. It's a good song.
That's how you steal every clamp from Home Depot. You just buy them one at a time.
You buy them. Let's be really clear. You don't steal them from Home Depot. You buy them from Home Depot one at a time, right?
One at a time.
One at a
I bought
time.
it one piece at a time.
Yeah.
That's not as good of a song. As it is.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
you're
you know what you do? When I was, not me, but somebody like me, somebody that I know from my childhood, you put it in the bottom of the shopping cart, and when you walk out with it, if the ring thing goes off, you go, oh, I forgot it was there. And if it doesn't go,
man.
bad idea.
then bleep my whole sentence.
All right. Let's take it a step further.
Picciuto just made a note to edit that out.
Yeah, no, I'm leaving it in there. You know, we'll hold the NBC making it liable for any kind of issues there.
Don't steal anything. That was a joke. I did that.
Yes, of course. Be good, people. Be good. So once you get some of these basic tools and you're building typical woodworking projects, boxes, chest of drawers, little tables and stuff, what are some tools that you find to be a luxury item but make life easier?
Dado blades or dado sets.
Mm-hmm.
So
set,
anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's a dado set is multiple blades and some spacers that you put in a table saw. And I guess they probably make them for circular saws too, right? I guess.
Ooh, I don't know.
No?
Yeah.
No, they don't.
Okay.
That would be too dangerous.
Too much bite.
That's a great invention, though. You just invented something really cool.
Dangerous.
Something dangerous that they don't sell for a reason. But anyway, you put these in the table saw, and it cuts, instead of an eighth inch or regular curve for a single blade, it cuts a wider slot. And so you can do that with a normal blade. It just takes longer. You have to do multiple passes, and it's a little bit harder to get it exactly if you need a very specific size slot. So a set of dado blades can be kind of expensive sometimes, but you can get it down to a really fine, perfectly sized slot, and especially if you're making shelves or something like that, that can save you a lot of time, a whole lot of time.
I would say if you have a table saw, a miter saw isn't necessary, but it does make life easier because you'll find yourself going back and forth where one you can do cross cuts and one you can do rip cuts. But you can do both on a table saw. So for me, the miter saw is a luxury item that speeds things up.
Well, now you say miter saw. My old school self thinks of a chop saw. That's what you mean.
A compound sliding miter saw. Yeah.
Because as a kid, those are all called chop saws. I kind of vaguely remember when they became more popular than ever before. And I remember my father and my uncle, they bought a Stanley miter box that had bearings on it so that the back saw, which is a saw with a big rib on the back, can be held in place by the bearings. And it had like a thing. So when you pick it up, the steel frame would kind of keep the saw guided at whatever angle you placed it at. And I remember my dad and my uncle buying those, my dad and his brother. Both bought those, and that was like the big purchase in like 1977. Like that was like, wow, can you believe the technology now? You don't have to make your own little wooden miter box and hand slice the thing and then hand slice one at 45 and then one at 90. They bought this thing, this whole big metal contraption, and you just put the back saw in it and you do it all by hand. And then I remember shortly thereafter, I guess a few years later, then these chop saws started coming out, and we still have one in the back, no guard on it. It's all rusty. It looks like something from like 1980 maybe, as far as like the styling goes, but maybe a Makita, I don't know, I forget what the name is. But then those became more and more popular. I remember a lot of guys growing up would be like, they're saving up to get themselves a chop saw. The chop saw is misleading. A lot of people think, I still call it a chop saw because that's what I remember calling it. But they think it's like cutting sushi, like you got to slam the thing down, like you're going to like literally chop a piece of wood. You're cutting a piece of wood, but that name is misleading. And I always say, don't chop like you're chopping a cleaver. You got to pull it down slowly, of course.
So,
let's see, luxury past that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Bob said come up with a project first and then buy the tools to complete that project. Sometimes people are just looking for a hobby and they acquire tools they inherit tools or they got a pile of tools and they want to make stuff, some of the first things that I suggest making is shop furniture. Make stands for your tools, and you need a workbench. That's really important. So those are good pieces to practice on and slap together. It doesn't have to look pretty; it just needs to be functional.
I think the workbench thing has come up a few times recently in comments on like Facebook and stuff. I've seen people talking about like, oh, it's a great project, just make yourself a workbench, and then they post this picture of this like beautiful, fine woodworking bench, that takes a huge amount of time and accuracy to make with these big Moxon vices on the side and all this stuff. That's certainly an option, but don't see that as your only workbench option. Because, I mean, if I had started and seen that and been like, I'm not making a workbench, what are you, crazy? The way I make my workbenches is a 2x4 frame with like MDF on top. And it's simple, it's ugly, but they're sturdy, and I can make one today and then make a different one in a month and not feel bad about the time that I put into them, if I destroy it or I need a second one or something. So you have a bunch of options. When David says make a workbench as a project, don't take that as a fine woodworking workbench unless that's something that you're interested in, because there's a big range there, I guess. But yeah, shop furniture is a great idea. You also have just, I tell people to go around their house and look for stuff that they wish was better. Sometimes you just need a place to hang your coat, and like one of the first woodworking projects I made when I was getting started I like to make stuff like I'd done woodworking in the past, but after I'd been out of it for a while and I came back and I was like, I need something just practical, just, something useful. And I made a little coat tree to put by our front door to hang our jackets on. And it took an afternoon, and we had it in the house for probably 7 years or something. Until we moved, I gave it away. But it was a super simple project, but it was really practical and really useful, and it was a great way to like get a good confidence boost, right? You do a project and then it's like always there. You can see it working, see the investment was well worth it. So
Jimmy, since you've been making things all your life, can you remember your first like real woodworking or fine woodworking, I'm using air quotes, project?
Yep. I've talked about this before. I just found it the other day. When I was a kid, my dad kind of guided me through the build of this little seahorse that I cut out on the jigsaw. And then we had a rotary tool, which is the equivalent of a Dremel tool, but it was made by Sears. And I used the big burr to scallop out what became the little raised sections on the scales of the seahorse. I was about 8 or 9 when I made that. So I was about 8. And that was like the first time I realized, wow, this is pretty cool. Like I look back and I'm like, I made that. That's right, I made that. All the other girls in kindergarten is like, I made that.
Yeah.
No, I always say, you want to build something with it. The next morning, you're like anxious to go and look at it. You're like, wow, look at that, I made that.
Yeah.
And I got that feeling. That was the first time I remember getting that feeling. I was like, wow, look at that, I just did that. Holy, I made that. And then my dad helped me. He burned it. It was the very first time. It was my very first woodworking project. I burned the wood to raise the grain because my dad learned that from some woodworker at the time, and he was doing it to everything. And we burned it, and then you give it a light wire brush, and the grain gets raised. And the funny thing is I can't spell, and neither can my dad. But my dad had made a sign with a router for some of the guys at the firehouse, and he misspelled something. So that piece of wood became scrap, and I made the seahorse on the other side. So when you look at the back of the seahorse, it's got like letters through it. You can't really tell what it says because it's like a real cropped up version of whatever that said.
It says Fry House instead of Firehouse.
It's just something wrong. And so it's funny. Taylor's at the house today. I'll ask her to send me a picture of it because I know exactly where it is.
Nice.
And the back too is funny. But yeah, and then my dad was really good at finding the pictures that are in the grid in the back of Popular Mechanics. And he would draw those, he'd draw out a little 1-inch grid and then draw it out of the magazine. So he would give me things to cut out on the jigsaw. And that's what I would cut out on I call it a jigsaw, but now it's called a scroll saw. And then ultimately he let me use the bandsaw. And that's how I started using the bandsaw. But as far as like assembling things, I was always making things with hot glue when I was real little. So my dad would always help me with parts and I glue them together with hot glue. Because at the time we didn't really have nail guns when I was real little. It was, you tap things together with a little hammer and nail. Glue it together and tap it together. It wasn't until I guess I was like a teenager that I started paying attention to nail guns because my dad started getting them. And I learned through the firehouse. My dad would get because all the firemen were all woodworkers on the side. And they were always sharing tools. So like my dad would show up with like a nail gun and a compressor and be like, this doesn't belong to me, but check this out. This is cool. And then they would trade it. And then he'd build up his arsenal and then he'd buy his own version. So they were always getting to like compare and try out tools, him and all the other firemen he worked with. So it was almost like the precursor to the maker community where it's like, oh, look what so-and-so's got. Maybe I should get one of those.
That's an interesting thought. I never really thought about that before, that, my perception of power tools is based on what my dad had when I was old enough to pay attention to what he had. But like, I'd never even thought about when pneumatic nail guns were first introduced. That's interesting.
They've always been. I mean, they've been around because I got some that are from like the '60s, but it was obviously much more of an industrialized product. It was like at a shoe factory or at a furniture factory. But the ones that became available to the average carpenter, as far as I could remember, or at least maybe it's just my own attention, didn't really come into my personal attention until the mid '80s. I guess I was like in high school. They definitely were not pneumatic guns at my high school. Yeah, absolutely not. There was a compressor, and that was to like run air tools for the car. There was a car shop at my high school.
Right. It's interesting to think about though. Like even stuff that we take for granted, like circular saw. Obviously, they've been around for a while, or the jigsaw. But at some point, those were brand new tools, and in my mind, those are just kind of like, as long as there have been power tools, there have been jigsaws. You know what I mean?
You want to hear something funny? It just happened this afternoon. Kyle's here, and he goes, dude, I forgot one thing. He goes, we usually don't use it unless we're doing a demo or redoing work, which I hardly ever do. He said, do you have a Sawzall? I'm like, oh yeah, I got a Sawzall. So we went out to my garage, and I pulled one off the wall, and I handed. He goes, dude, this has got a cord on it. Do you have like one that takes a battery? I go, oh yeah. I like, I should have had a V8. I'm like, of course I do. But when you say you have a Sawzall, I just think of this old school Sawzall, which I used to use because it was the one I would always go to. It's called a Porter cable called a cat's paw, if anybody knows which one that was from. It's from the 90s. And I go, of course I got the 60 volt. I forgot it was like right on the other side of the room, so I gave him that instead. But it's funny how my mind thinks because I'm an old man. So I'm like, oh, let me just get the one I learned on.
Fun fact. Sawzall is actually a, I believe it's a Milwaukee Tools term.
Yeah, it's like a Band-Aid, yeah.
Yeah, because I did a DeWalt video a year and a half ago, and I said Sawzall when I should have said reciprocating saw, and it didn't. Nobody caught it at first, and then the agency I was working with was like, "Oh my goodness, we have a disaster here. We need to fix this."
Yeah.
So
there's a bunch of things like that. I mean, like even skill saw, people use that for circular saw, but it's a brand name. There's a lot of this. Well, okay. Any other like getting started woodworking essentials? I mean, obviously measuring tape. I think a speed square is really handy, and it's like $4 or $5, but it's one of those things that's just really handy to have around. Anything else like that somebody would want to just, if somebody had $100 to pick up a bunch of little things at the store?
Combination squares. I use my combination square in almost every single project. I have the little 6-inch one and then the 12-inch one.
Mm-hmm. And that has a 45 degree and a 90 degree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And some combination squares also have the thing for centering a circle on the end of a dowel rod, for instance. Sometimes you have the combination square where it's got the 90, the 45, and then on the other end of it, it's got the exactly 45 perpendicular to the center line of a circle. That's how I have 3 combination squares, and I always buy that extra part and slide it on the end, so it's on either. If I don't need it, then I pull it off and then put it back, so it's always with it. What else could you get? A snap line is always really important, especially if you're going to be doing some long, straight things. Snap line always helps. Or you could use a snap line if you're going to lay down. If you're making, let's say you're making a shelf and you're going to put a back on that shelf, and you need to put a bunch of lines so you know that when you nail the back of the shelf on, you're going to nail it into the shelves, the several different shelves. You could use a chalk line to snap so you know that you can make a guide to give you where you're going to nail or screw your screws to keep the back on. Of course, the outside edge, you know where all that is, but you need to mark where the back of each shelf is going to be if you're going to use that as support for the shelves. Just to bring it up since I'm talking about it, it's an important part of any shelf build is that you put the back on because it gives the shelves tremendous strength from sagging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you nail into each one of those shelves. that's why it's important. And the chalk line, you could make a line a really long line.
Yeah. And it's super handy. I mean, like, that's one of those things I think of, like, I wouldn't have thought to use it for shelves. That's genius. I think of that more as a, if you're doing home renovation or if you're laying something out on the ground, you know, like, I used it a lot when I was doing the hardwood flooring to get a straight line, like, offset from the wall. So if I needed 3/8 off of the wall all the way along the wall, the chalk line was really handy for that. So,
you know, it's also extremely handy, and I what I do in my workflow is, I don't do obviously as many installations as I used to, but between Welder and I, when I was doing heavy stuff, Welder was my biggest asset, helping me remember things, and we worked together. We had the little Klein zipper bags that you get from Home Depot. You get 3 or 4 of them in the Klein zipper bag. You get there comes yellow, blue, red, and green. You get 4 of them in a package. They're a little expensive, but they're good because I have tons of them, and one of them just has chisels in it. One of them just has screwdrivers in it because we go on the road, and we have one that just has string lines and level bulbs, little level spirit levels. So it's, of course, nowadays everyone just uses a laser level, which is. Did you ever try using a laser level? It's really a pain in the ass, isn't it? Is it just me?
I've never used one, actually.
They work fine for
they're
me.
a pain in.
Old man Jimmy
Technology.
2 shows.
Yeah.
The funniest thing is, I'm gonna say one thing. The part of the reason I would get a little frustrated on the show is because I wasn't the tool person. I showed up and there was a shop full of tools, most of them useless, and there was they had, like, every time I said, "Oh, can we get some more?" They'd bring over more of these little cubes that had a laser level. There was 25 laser level cubes on. I don't want to say the brand. There's like 25 laser level cubes on set, and there wasn't one reason to level anything throughout the entire season. They kept showing up, and I actually took one with me to experiment with in the hotel room. I didn't even know how to use it. But instead of dealing with a laser level that has bad batteries and doesn't really give you the level outside of 3 feet, because the laser level light blops off, get a string. Just use a string and the little spirit level thing that hooks on the string.
Yeah.
And so to get straight lines in a room, it's perfect if you're going to be in a gallery space, laying out or in your own home, and you're going to lay out a bunch of pictures across a wall. Lay out a string. Just tape it at one end of the room, drag it across the wall, and tape it level at the other end of the room. And now you have a perfect straight line that you can use as a guide.
Brilliant.
Power of the string. Invented by the Egyptians.
The power of the string.
No brand name.
All right, you guys got anything else for getting started?
We could go on forever and ever. I mean,
it's one of the
razor blade.
Razor, a knife's a good thing to have. There's like an infinite number of stuff. You can always have another thing that gives you a little bit more, capability to do some other thing. But it really comes down to what you need done, and that's different for every person. It's different pretty much for every project. It's just a hard thing to answer, which is why we don't try to answer it too often.
And now we'll just direct people to this episode.
Yeah. Here's a place where we didn't answer it very well. Go to this episode 141 of Making It. Cool. Well, what have you guys been watching? Anything new?
All right.
As
so
we
got
both go to our history. At least me. As we go to me history.
We got an email from Kayla, and she's like, my boyfriend made me this engagement ring, and this video is incredible. Like, I made a very simple wooden ring. It took a day. He made the mold to pour the metal into, to hold the stone, to do like this. It's a really well done video, and Kayla should be very happy with what came out of it. It's really awesome. Beautiful. Awesome. Well done video as well.
Sweet. Cool. Jimmy, what you got?
You know what? I'm gonna talk about somebody I've already talked about, and it's because I think he did an extremely amazing job. I'm gonna talk about my buddy Brett. Brett's been sharing the shop with me. Brett did a video where he went and he bought a splitter, like a chunk of steel you hammer into a log to split the log. I didn't talk about this, did I, last week?
No, I don't think so.
He bought a wedge, a steel wedge, and he did most of this while I was in California, and he brought it to my house, used my forge in the backyard, and drifted a hole, which basically means you heated up the steel and punctured a hole through it. You drifted the hole. He turned that into like sort of a bearded like Viking axe, Viking hatchet. He did such an incredible job, and then he did a grind on it. So he took this piece of steel, dragged it out, kind of drooped it down, turned it into a hatchet head, and then made the handle for it and did all this stuff. And he's part of Rory May Dirty Smith. He's doing a zombie challenge. So if you go and check out Rory's hashtags, and you'll see how to enter the zombie challenge. And Brett entered the zombie weapon challenge, Rory May's. So check out Rory May and check out Brett's. His name of his channel is Skull and Spades. I'll give you guys a link. And the reason I'm so impressed with it is because when he first met me, he had never really done any blacksmithing. We together went to a blacksmithing outing, and that was the first time I ever really done any, maybe his second or third time. But now he jumps to this, and he did an incredible amount of work, and he did it well. So go check out Brett's bearded. I don't know exactly what the name of it is. I'll find it now and send it.
That's awesome.
But it's one of the last videos he did, if you guys haven't seen it.
I've been watching, speaking of blacksmithing, I've been watching so much Alex Steele lately that I'm just like chomping at the bit to try it. It looks, I mean, he makes everything fun. It just looks like it's a blast because of his personality. But just from watching him turn just blocks of steel into really awesome stuff, it's just super interesting. And I don't really have the infrastructure. Like, I don't have a place to do it. I don't have a forge. I don't have any of the stuff that I need for it yet. But yeah, I'm definitely interested. So I'm looking forward to seeing that video from Brett.
Brett's calling it the mummy. Brett's I'm sorry. The mummy Besset's Claw. Brett, he's doing a series of monster builds leading up to Halloween, and this is the mummy. He did Frankentable. He did the mummy. Is this one I'm talking about?
Oh, awesome.
But in it, and now he's doing one for vampires. He's working on it right now. And he's working on it right now, and it's coming out really cool. He's doing like a vampire case.
Sweet. Well, mine is very different. So some friends of mine, this is my friend Dave. He's been a friend of mine for years and years and years and years. And he's extremely talented. He's the guy that did the artwork for the side of my arcade machine. So it's like of all of our family. It's an amazing illustration. He makes video games for a living. And he and his wife recently, well, actually about a year ago, started talking about this idea for a YouTube channel. They've launched it since then, and it's done okay. They haven't gotten the traction that I think they need, but they also came to my house this past weekend to hang out, and so I can't really explain it. Let me go back. So they started a YouTube channel as puppets, and so they made their own puppets, and then they do video game playthroughs, but then they make it so it looks like the puppets are playing the video games, and they do commentary over the video game as puppets. And so the people are never on screen. So they do these Let's Plays, and they're really funny. And then they're kind of like in an off season right now. So he's been doing these like vlog type videos where he's holding the phone, but he's also holding the puppet in the other hand. So it looks like the puppet's holding the phone, like going around doing like a selfie vlog style thing. And Dave is just super funny. He makes all sorts of jokes all the time, and he's really good at like coming up with stuff right off the top of his head. So he's done a couple of these, and they're really good. And they were at our house, and he was like, "Hey, do you mind if I go down and like do a little vlog from your shop?" And so he came down and was like going around the shops, you know, acting like he knew what all the tools were, and he was just coming up with really funny names for them. And so he's going through the shop, and you see all these tools, and he's talking about, "What this one? That does this." And then we put a little bit at the end where I walk in to the shop, and he hops behind something, and he's like, "Just shh, everybody be quiet." You know, and I'm like, "Is there somebody in here?" So we played it pretty well. It turned out good. And then he came on my live stream the other day on Twitch as the puppet. So I'm talking to the camera, and all of a sudden this puppet pops up next to me, and then we had a 30-minute conversation or something. It was great.
What is the name? I'm looking.
So the channel is called the Oddlings, and I'll put a link to it. And we got them like through our live stream. We had all the live stream people subscribe, and they got to 100 subscribers. So they're a pretty small channel, but he's just hilarious. They have a really good time doing it. So go check him out.
Got another one.
Nice.
128. Oh, I see. There's like a table saw in the puppet.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll link to the one where he was in my shop because it was pretty funny. But yeah, go check them out. Before we go, got to thank our Patreon supporters. As always,
Yes.
Awesome. Especially our top supporters, Wise Old Dal, Evan and Caitlin, Corey Ward, Malton Make, A Glimpse Inside, Works by Solo, Torbil Terry, a new one this week, Freeman Furnishings, and Make, Build, Modify. So thank you to you guys and to everybody else that supports us over there. It means a ton.
Absolutely.
It means a lot. And if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/makingit, the real making it. And not to NBC, not to NBC.com/makingit, which I don't know if that's right or not. But go to patreon.com/makingit and help us out there. And you get to listen to the after show, which is more of us talking. And if you don't want to do Patreon, I always forget to say this. You can just share the show. That's really helpful to get more people listening, to let people know that we are the original Making It show, that nobody can replace us. Just share the show around. And all that stuff. So
Bob said that, by the way. It was Bob Clagett. That was not Jimmy Diresta. He was a participant on the show.
they can't do anything to me. I'm just kidding. No. I'm excited to see your show, man. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. You know, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a viewing party here in my new shop in January. So it'll be like me, so some local friends, I'll have them over and we'll watch the show in my shop.
Nice.
Remind me when you do that, I'll hide under my bed.
And you're both invited, by the way.
Sweet.
I'll bring my bed.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And see you next week.
Later.
I love making stuff.
You love the original Making It.